My name is Hunter Webb. I run a business in Richmond, Virginia, and we reclaim old buildings on the East Coast and from other places, barns, factory buildings. And my talk is about some of the advantages and some of the methods that we use to repurpose this material. And this is an old granary on the James River east of Richmond. And it was a really fascinating building. I'm going to try to be brief on this. I've got about 30 slides to roll through. You have some environmental benefits. We're not putting this material back in the landfill. I think it's quite beautiful material if used the right way. You can do some great finishes. And also, there are certain woods, even in this country now, that you can only get reclaimed, like hard pine and wormy chestnut. And also, a lot of this wood was cut down long enough ago that it comes from a primordial or a first growth forest where it's grown under natural competition and not in a farming state. So wood grows very slow, real tight grain. It's just beautiful stuff. Also, there are patinas and surface textures you get from 100 years of weather and rain and moisture and change and temperature that you just can't achieve through other means. Some of the sources we use: barns, factories, fences, old homes, bridges. When I go to look for a barn, first thing we want to do is identify what species it is, and often it's many species. These buildings were often constructed from the material that was on the land close by, and labor and transportation were big issues 150 years ago. They weren't trucking things around like they do now. We also check to make sure that the material is actually sound, hasn't been treated with lead paint or other toxic materials, and the bugs haven't gotten too far with it. This is a barn out of Pennsylvania. This is actually the project that Miki's working on. This is the barn that material came from. It was a chestnut barn in Pennsylvania. Beautiful stuff. There was some oak in there also. It was a hayloft. These buildings are obviously taken down by hand. Using excavator type tools, it would destroy a lot of the material, so we often disassemble these with cranes and forklifts and tractors and a lot of hand work. We recycle the metal on the buildings. And it's a trick to do it safely. Often I'm trying to get material you can get about 10,000 board feet of this material on a trailer. We sometimes get smaller stuff too, but here I am receiving some of the material, and we'll get 4/4 material off the outside of the barn, 5/4 off the floorboard. Sometimes it'll be tongue and groove. If the building's old enough, it'll have hand-hewn members to it. I really love that stuff. We try to make sure we're getting what we paid for and that it arrived as it was supposed to. And then I'm going to go through the short process here, or a long process actually, of what we have to do to prepare the material to use it again. The first thing is to get all the metal out of it, and we use those hand magnetometers that you see in the airport. We find some of the strangest stuff, lots of bullets, believe it or not. Sometimes the bullets are in there from when it was a tree, and sometimes from when it was a barn. I've gotten some barn siding that was just covered with buckshot, and it machines pretty nicely because it's lead. We also have to pay attention to the moisture content. We're often making flooring or paneling, and it's going inside. So we get the moisture content down to 7 to 9%. We also treat in this kiln. This is a SIP panel construction using a Nile Systems kiln. We bring the temperature up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 48 hours, and sometimes longer if we're working with thicker material. And that kills or dries out any insects that are still in the wood. So we don't use chemicals to do that. On the wider stuff, or the thicker material like the 2x and beams, we'll resaw with we'll start breaking that down into thinner pieces. We use a portable band mill also out back where we'll break down the bigger beams into stuff that won't fit in the other mill. Then we plane it, and a lot of times we're trying to preserve the original surface that is on the barn. Tobacco barns will often have a really nice brown patina from them smoking or curing the tobacco in there. And where I'm from in Virginia, there's a lot of those, and they're typically pine or oak. Then we straight line the material into blanks or like-sized pieces. And then we mold it and put a tongue and groove or a shiplap joint on it. And then sometimes we're also making parts for furniture or for beams or beam skins or paneling. This picture on the left is joist material out of an industrial structure in New York, or not industrial, but like a warehouse in New York. And it had this really nice sawn face on it, and they were 2x material, so we resawed all those in half so we could fold them like this and get the two original surface faces out of this 2x material. And then we tongue and grooved it and planed it to the proper thickness, and it's going down in a house somewhere out in Colorado. We get, gosh, it's not a great picture there from my angle, but the hewn surfaces that you see, this is back from before, these were created back before we really had good saw blade technology. So the one on the left is a 4-sided hewn beam, and those were typically for the structure or the columns. And then these pieces on the left are what are called a sleeper, where they just hewn the top and the bottom faces, and then they put them together and make the floor in these large bank barns. And some of the barns I've seen, at the time I saw them, you couldn't do it, but when they built them, I bet you could have driven a dump truck in them. I mean, they just looked like they were really built for years and years of use. Here's some of the products that we make. A lot of flooring. This particular floor is what we call a hit and miss floor, so we'll preserve some of the old surface that was created when they built the barn, and we'll plane it a little bit, and you'll see the darker spots are where we missed, and the lighter spots are where it's a bit smoother. We also create tables and wall paneling. This is an ice cream shop in Richmond that we contributed some stuff to. This shows a porch on the left that has that gray siding you see that on a typical barn that hasn't been painted. It's really popular. And then I just threw this one in. I also love live edge stuff or urban reclaim. We do some of that. And this was a walnut tree that came off of a golf course, and that's my dog Obi. Those slabs. This tree was so big, we actually dug it up instead of cutting it down to get that nice burl wood that's down in the ground. This is a hit and miss floor we did for a residence, and we try to talk our clients into using low VC or no VOC oils, and we really try to push the green aspect, everything we can with the green aspect of using these products. And so this is a type of finish that comes out of Europe that is made from flaxseed oil. It's very matte. We work on some restaurants. We do the tabletops and wall paneling for them. We did the floor in this job too. And this is a great example of what you can do with the hewn beams. We do a lot of wire brushing, a lot of nail pulling, and these came out of a bank barn in Waynesboro, Virginia. That particular barn, we were able to reclaim about 20,000 board feet out of it, and a lot of it was this hewn material, which doesn't really lend itself well to making into flooring or paneling because it's checked up, and the waste yield would be so bad. So we save these for this kind of application, and we wire brush them and oil them, and sometimes cut new nice joinery into them for the client. Now this is some reclaimed oak beams where we took the hewn beams and the client wanted a smoother face, so we cut that off and we saved the skins and then used the core to do more timber work. Well, we can really only do that with the larger stuff. And then we do a lot of barn doors. This is gray board. This is actually fence from Highland County, Virginia, and we make these sliding barn doors for residences and corporate stuff. And then mantles also, and then we also keep, sometimes we get some interesting iron work out of some of these buildings. I find we get big cast iron cook pots sometimes, and they have these hayloft things that people like to make light fixtures out of. Countertops. And this was I put this picture in here. We didn't build the structure, but we did the tabletops. But this was a historic property in Petersburg, Virginia, and it had been a dance club for about 30 years, and they put a drop ceiling in it. When they went to do the demolition, they didn't even know this stuff was up in the ceiling of this place, so they sandblasted it and put it back, used it, and made a really cool restaurant, historic restaurant in it. And these tabletops are out of that same Waynesboro barn I was talking about earlier. It's all oak. And then we also do the sort of more traditional old construction here with stair treads and flooring, and we can match all that together. And this is one of my favorite doors that we made. This material, as you can see, all those little holes on the surface. These were boards off the roof of a barn that had probably had like 4 roofs nailed on it over the years. So it was just riddled with nails, and I think we spent about 5 times as much time as we normally do pulling the nails out of that material, but the client saw it. We kept it all together, we sorted it out, and we kept it for a project like this, and I think it turned out pretty well. If you're interested in sourcing reclaimed material, there's a couple of websites here. Can you all see that? I can't see it from over here. A couple of facts about doing reclaimed work. About 30 to 40% of everything that we bring in from a barn is not usable for the wood. We recycle it into the landfill. We make a lot of sawdust out of it. There's a lot of waste on top of that. But what I really think, one of the things that I'm really proud of in working with this material is that I see these structures and I think about how hard it would have been to do that as with no power tools. And you know that a lot of men and women probably put a lot of effort into making these structures. And I love the idea of giving that energy life again. And you know, the technology of farming has changed so much that a lot of these structures, if we don't do this with them, do these things with this material, they'll just return to they're a hazard for the people who own them, because they just don't farm that way anymore. And these structures, this is, I think, a great way to repurpose this material. Any questions? All right, thank you.